Good morning, my teachers, my colleagues, and the students. So today I have been given the task to talk against the treat all in hepatitis B virus. So globally, approximately 10% of the infected individuals, around 300 individuals are infected with chronic hepatitis B, are aware of their diagnosis, and 2% of them are currently on treatment. In a large systemic review published recently, based on the around 160 studies, 19% of the individuals are treatment eligible based on the current guidelines. So the question in the current debate is whether the remaining 81% who are treatment ineligible are worthy for treatment right at the time of the diagnosis. So my outline for presentation for next 20 minutes is who are the patients who are treatment eligible. What is the evidence favoring the treatment select versus treatment all approach? What are the limitations of the currently available antiviral therapies, treatment in special setting, and my conclusion. So who are the patients who are treatment eligible? We have to treat these patients irrespective of the therapy available. So all patients with cirrhosis, all patients with liver failure, whether it is ALF, ACLF, or patient with severe reactivation of hepatitis B need therapy right at the time of diagnosis. Or the patients who have the high HBV DNA or high ALT more than 2 times need therapy irrespective of stage of liver disease. Or less stringent criteria based on the ALT and HBV DNA, especially in those patients who have the significant fibrosis or inflammation based on liver biopsy or non-invasive parameters to assess the liver stiffness. Additional factors for considering the therapy include the immunotolerant patients who are older, more than 30 to 40 years of age, patients with family history of liver cancer, liver cirrhosis, healthcare workers for professional reasons, and the pregnant woman with high HBV DNA, post-transplant patient with HBV cirrhosis, immunosuppressive therapy, and patients with extrahepatic manifestations. So we are clear that these patients are treatment eligible and need therapy. What about the remaining? So current approach is to treat selected patient when indicated, when they fulfill the eligibility criteria, and treatment is initiated as per the guideline. So main aim is to prevent the cirrhosis-related decompensation or cirrhosis-related and development of hepatocellular carcinoma. And indeed, the long-term antiviral is desirable in the treatment-eligible patients because the studies have shown that in treatment-eligible patients, particularly in patients with cirrhosis, it has been shown to improve the stage of fibrosis. There are instances of cirrhosis regression with long-term antiviral therapy. In HBV cirrhosis, there is a reduced risk of liver cancer over a period of time with antiviral therapy. And in patients with cirrhosis, there is risk of prevention of decompensation or development of ACLF when we give the antiviral therapy. So most of the patients we see in our clinic are incidentally detected asymptomatic HBV infection, and these are the patients who generally have the low HBV DNA, have no additional risk factor of liver disease progression, fibrosis progression, no have diabetes or the superadded alcoholism or MAFLD. So in these patients, is it wise to give the early antiviral therapy right at the time of diagnosis based on the treat-all approach? Hepatitis B, as we know, is an oncogenic virus. So the key questions are, what is the risk of development of hepatocellular carcinoma in those patients who have no risk factors, especially the patient with F0 and F1 fibrosis, and whether the early antiviral therapy prevent SCC in such group of patients. So these are the key questions for treat-all approach. So if you see the large data from Taiwan, this prospective population-based study, they have looked at the incidence of the liver cancer after a long follow-up. All patients were treatment naive. And the baseline HBV DNA was a strong predictor of development of liver cancer in these patients. But one thing is to note that the patients who have the HBV DNA of less than 2,000 international unit per ml, which are currently treatment eligible, has no risk factor for development of liver cancer. So you can see that if the HBV DNA is less than 10,000 copies per unit, the liver cancer incidence is not increased in these patients. Moreover, the antiviral therapy does not prevent liver cancer in non-cirrhotic hepatitis B infection. As you can see here in this large study, in patients with cirrhosis, use of lamivudine or entecavir significantly reduced the risk of liver cancer over follow-up. But in patients who are not cirrhotic, the overall risk factor for liver cancer is always 2% at the end of 5 years. The same with entecavir, same with lamivudine. So there is no use of antiviral to prevent the liver cancer in patients with non-cirrhotic HBV infection. Moreover, in another study which was published from the Greek group, they have shown that in patients with compensated cirrhosis, use of antiviral therapy in form of tenofovir or entecavir, after 5 years of therapy, there is a significant reduction in the risk of development of new incident SCC, almost half reduction in the risk of SCC. But in patients with chronic hepatitis, non-cirrhotic patient, there is a negligible risk of SCC overall, as well as there is no reduction of antiviral therapy. So SCC risk decreased after 5 years of antiviral therapy only in patients who have the cirrhosis at the baseline. And in patients with non-cirrhotic, it does not matter whether the DNA is negative or whether its DNA is intermittently detectable. If it is HBV DNA is less than 2000. If HBV DNA is less than 2000, we should be very sure that this patient is very unlikely to develop the liver cancer in these patients. This has been shown in the recent study. The development of liver-related event, decomposition and SCC depends on the severity of the liver disease. The higher the liver fibrosis or cirrhosis, the more the liver-related events in patient with chronic hepatitis B. So there are many limitations with the currently available therapy. We cannot cure the virus with the available therapy. The cure rate is very limited. The high viral load in patients with immunotolerant hepatitis B, there is a weak immune response. The immune response may be there, but there is no inflammatory response against the virus due to presence of the exhausted immune phenotype, presence of PD-1, CTLA-4 inhibitors on the surface of the T cells. Moreover, when we give the antiviral therapy, we can reduce the HBV DNA because it acts on the DNA polymerase, but it does not clear the virus. There is no or negligible effect on the cccDNA or HBsAg quantitative. As this has been shown with the data on the efficacy of the antiviral therapy, the use of entecavir, tenofovir over the period of time, they have been shown that the HBsAg loss is less than 3%, 5% in E-positive patients, significantly lesser in the S-antigen positive patients. So the antiviral therapy are not effective, or they only decrease the HBV DNA, but they do not clear the virus. And how long we need to take the antiviral therapy, this remains a lifelong commitment. It includes the cost, adherence problems, risk of flares after the loss of adherence, and the safety in the high-risk individuals, especially in the older individuals with renal failure, the osteoporosis. All these the factors should weigh in the mind. Then the HBsAg loss is very limited with the currently available therapy, but it is important because the complete viral suppression is not enough. The studies have shown that those patients who achieve the HBsAg seroclearance after the antiviral therapy has significantly reduced to 9-fold higher, lesser risk of development of liver cancer over the long period of follow-up. And the recent study from the Taiwan group has shown that the spontaneous HBsAg clearance rate is still very high if we follow these patients over a long period of time. In this particular study, they have shown that over 25 years of follow-up, the 40% of the patients have the HBsAg loss spontaneously without antiviral therapy. And this was independent of the treatment history. The patients who are IDHs, which low HBV DNA, low HBsAg quantitative, have the higher risk of spontaneous HBsAg loss. And it does not matter whether we achieve the spontaneous HBsAg loss or we achieve the HBsAg loss after the antiviral therapy. The outcomes in terms of the liver-related events are similar in both the cases. And the failure to adherence to antiviral therapy. Suppose we start the antiviral therapy by treat-all approach in all the patients, young patients, and the studies have shown that 75% of the patient may have the adherence at 5 years, 25% may fail to adhere with therapy. And when we stop the antiviral therapy, there is always a risk of flares, the risk of viral relapse with HBV DNA elevation, almost 70% to 90% depending on the genotype, and also risk of clinical relapse in around 30% of the patients. Some of the patients who had the moderate to significant fibrosis may develop the severe symptomatic flares with exacerbation and the ACLF-like phenotype. So I think in non-cirrhotic treatment ineligible chronic hepatitis B patient, rather than antiviral therapy, the regular follow-up is more important. The study have shown that if we follow these patients more regularly at 6 months at least, 6 months to 1 year, then we can detect the early development of liver cancer, which is although rare, but we can early detect the liver cancer, which may be more amenable to curative therapy with lesser mortality. Thankfully, the long-term safety profile of nucleoside analog in the real-world setting is very good. The currently available therapies, the risk of renal failure or renal-related events are less than 2%. And with the available of the TAF or tenofovir alafenamide therapy, the risk is significantly reduced even in these 2% of the patients. However, we should be when we prescribe the long-term antiviral therapy, especially in the older patients where we give the dual antiviral therapy, or patients with comorbidities like diabetes, osteoporosis, we should be very careful and monitor for the adverse events. Now the treatment in the specific settings. Right now, the guidelines suggest the treatment in the patients who are having chronic hepatitis, whether it is E antigen positive or E antigen negative, because these patients are at risk of disease progression with development of liver cancer and liver-related events. But it is still not recommended in patients who are immunotolerant, the HBeAg positive chronic infection, or patients who are inactive carrier, the patients who are E antigen negative chronic infection. So what are immunotolerant patients? Immunotolerant patients are usually the young patients who are very high DNA, more than 8 log. True immunotolerant patients have HBV DNA of more than 8 log HBV DNA. And they have the normal ALT, minimal liver damage, with limited inflammation. And the current all guidelines suggest no treatment for these immunotolerant patients. And except the patients who are older, the more than 30 to 40 years of age, because the higher the more the older age of E antigen seroconversion, more the risk of development of chronic hepatitis as well as liver fibrosis progression. So do not treat the E antigen positive chronic infection who are immunotolerant if they are not eligible, if they are not older, because studies have shown that the paired biopsy based study, the fibrosis progression is uncommon in the true immunotolerant patients. The 5-year follow-up, there is no significant change in the liver fibrosis in these patients. Moreover, treatment has no benefit. The rate of HBsAg loss is negligible even after the therapy for 4 years. The decline in the HBV DNA is very slow, as even after the 4 years, the decline is around 50 to 75%, and the S antigen loss is very limited. Moreover, once we stop the therapy, even after a prolonged period of time, there is always a risk of clinical or biochemical relapse. Almost all the patients develop the clinical relapse after the cessation of therapy in immunotolerant patients. A recent Korean study, which was highly quoted, which have shown that the patients who are immunotolerant, untreated, as compared to immunoactive patients who are treated, have the higher cumulative incidence of development of liver cancer as well as death or liver transplantation after 10 years of follow-up. But the mean age of these, if we read the study carefully, the mean age of these patients are 40 years. They are already older, and they are usually, in all guidelines, the 30 to 40 years is a treatment eligibility for immunotolerant patient. Moreover, most of these patients are generally not the true immunotolerant patient. The DNA should be more than 8 log. Here, the 26% of the patient are DNA less than 7 log. So there is a misclassification of low-grade immunoactive phase into immunotolerant, most likely in this study, because the high HBV DNA, very high HBV DNA is not a very high risk of liver cancer. It is a moderate HBV DNA in the log 6 to log 8, which is a very high, which lead to the liver cancer incidence over follow-up. There's a low persistent immune-mediated hepatocyte killing, clonal expansion of the HBV-resistant hepatocytes, and increased risk of SCC. If we lower the HBV DNA either spontaneously or by antiviral therapy, if HBV DNA is 6 to 8 log, then is a high risk of SCC, not in the true immunotolerant patients. Then what about the inactive carrier? If we look at the natural history of the inactive carriers or the long-term outcomes of E antigen negative HBsAg carriers in relation to ALT, then you can see here, after the median follow-up of 13 years, the risk of liver-related events are negligible. So 0.7% develop cirrhosis, 0.4% develop liver cancer, mortality is negligible in these patients. The problem with diagnosis of inactive infection is that we need to follow the ALT level for at least 1 year. There should be persistent ALT level normal every 3 monthly for at least 1 year to label these patients as inactive carrier. But the recent studies have shown that if we do the quantitative HBsAg at baseline, if DNA is less than 2000, HBsAg quantitative is less than 1000, then it is as equal to monitoring the ALT level every 3 monthly. And this is important because those patients who are true inactive carriers, the patients who have the normal ALT, DNA less than 2000, HBsAg less than 1000, they have the very little risk of development of chronic hepatitis. The risk of 10% at 10 years chronic hepatitis, the risk of cirrhosis is 2% at the end of 20 years. So they generally have a good outcome, and I think these patients are not worthy to get the antiviral therapies. Moreover, the negative DNA and normal ALT in patients in inactive carrier or inactive who are treatment naive is different from what we achieve with the antiviral therapy. The studies have shown that in patients who have no cirrhosis, who have the negative DNA, who are complete responder after on antiviral therapy, still have the higher risk of liver cancer. However, those patients who are inactive disease, who are treatment naive, have the very little risk of liver cancer after 5 years of follow-up, less than 0.1%. Now we have many patients. 1/3 of the patients who we see in our clinics have the indeterminate stage, or we can say the gray zone fibrosis. So what are the gray zone patients? In patients who are E antigen positive, the gray zone patients are those patients who are having the low DNA normal ALT, low DNA high ALT, and E antigen negative patients, the gray zone patients are patients who have high ALT, normal DNA, or patients with high DNA normal ALT. So the most common phenotype is the HBeAg negative patients with high ALT, the DNA is less than 10,000, are the primary gray zone patient, and most of the patients have underlying metabolic syndrome with underlying diabetes, and ALT elevation is not due to hepatitis B, but due to presence of metabolic syndrome. And the study have shown that the antiviral therapy can be delayed or avoided in the significant proportion of the E negative Caucasian patient with gray zone fibrosis. If we follow these patients who are E antigen negative and gray zone fibrosis with high ALT, even after the 5 years of follow-up, there is no liver-related events. Many remain in the indeterminate state, many become inactive, many become, the active is less than 10%. So do we really need the treat based on these evidences? Do we really need the treat all approach in all patients right at the time of the diagnosis? So this study, the outcome of the patients with chronic hepatitis B who do not meet the treatment criteria for antiviral therapy at presentation, the conclusion is that the current guidelines for initiating therapies are appropriate. They are based on the evidence, and we should not, we should treat the other patients on the case-to-case basis. Generally, we should avoid therapy in these patients. There are hazards with treat-all approach. There is a pill burden. How long can patient take for drug for lifelong? And this treatment may lead to stigma and long-term compliance in the young asymptomatic individuals. And we have the resource, our country is a developing country in a resource constrained setting. If we, the treatment, HPV treatment is scaled up, the other healthcare provisions may suffer, especially the morbid conditions like diabetes or communicable diseases, infection, etc. The budget for these will be hampered. So there are many retrospective studies which have shown that the only 20 to 60% of the patients who develop SCC or 27 to 70% of the patients who develop liver-related deaths meet the guideline criteria for initiating treatment at presentation. But if we look carefully in these studies, many of these studies have almost 50% of the patients who are cirrhotic, and they already meet the treatment criteria. And they are based on the assumptions that the patients would not be treated if they subsequently met the criteria for treatment. And the current treatment would be 100% effective in preventing the cirrhosis, liver failure, and SCC. So these are all ideal situations, but still we need further studies. So evidence-based medicine, we need to treat the right patient at the right time, and depending on the natural history of the disease, what is the goal of the treatment, individualized therapy in selected patients, and if patient is willing and patient is aware enough for regular follow-up, I think the treatment select approach is the best one. Thank you for the kind attention, please.